Hey everyone, Ramel here, and today we'll be building my friend's Polycarbonate Think6.5 V2 1U. This isn't going to be a full-on review video, but more so just the build and the sound test. I'll be saving the full review video on my own personal Think, but that is still in the works. I have the Deep Ocean colorway and I haven't found any keycaps that I like to go with it. In the meantime, I've been building Thinks that my friends have commissioned me to build for them. If you haven't seen the Think6.5 V2 2U that I built for M, you can find that linked up at the top. Although you might not be able to hear it since it is built with silent alpacas. Anyways, let's get back to this build. As you saw, the unboxing process for the Think is quite nice. You have the keyboard in one box and you have the plate, PCB, and tools in the other box. These are also separated in their own individual boxes. The plate that comes with the Think is an FR4 plate in white, and you also have a screwdriver as well as tweezers in the accessories. My friend went with Holy Pandas for his build, and I lubed them up with Tribosys 3203 on the housing and the stem, and Krytox 105 on the springs. We also use 0.15 TX films. As always, if I'm lubing off stream, I try to watch some anime to keep me occupied. I haven't seen March Comes In Like a Lion, so that's what I've been watching these days besides the ones I'm following this season. I'm using the Monster Gear loop station and it makes lubing a lot easier for me. If you haven't lubed switches before, this is generally how the process goes. You need a switch opener to open up the switches, and it breaks apart into 4 different pieces. The bottom housing I put directly into the Monster Gear loop station, the top housing and the springs I put in separate bowls, and the stems I just put off onto this little compartment here. The springs are then put into a Ziploc bag like you see here, and I put 1 drop of 105 per 10 springs. So in this case, I put about 7 springs or 7 drops since I'm doing 70 springs. Next up, I lube the bottom housing, and a little goes a long way, especially when you're lubing. You don't want to put too much lube as that can really make it feel mushy and sometimes gives off a weird sound if there is a lot of lube in there. For the stem, I just lube a little bit on the sides of the stem and I avoid the feet because these are tactile switches. If you put lube on the feet themselves, then you might lose that tactile bump and it'll feel like a linear switch. I put the switch film, the spring, the stem, and then you put the top housing after that and close it all up. You have to do this for however many switches you get, so put on your favorite anime or show or whatever, listen to a podcast because it does take a bit of time. For the stabilizers, we're going with Durock V2 stabilizers. For the housing, I use Krytox 205 grade 0, and for the stem, I use BDZ. For a 65% build, we only need 3 2U stabs and the spacebar stab. The right shift is a bit smaller, so it doesn't require a stabilizer. Once I finish lubing the stabilizers, I go ahead and test them on the PCB and plate, and I would add more lube as necessary if I still hear some ticking or rattling. After everything sounds good to me, it's time to pop the rest of the switches onto the plate and then put the plate on top of the PCB with the switches on. In this build, we also use the foam between the plate and the PCB. The next part is probably the part that I enjoy the most when it comes to keyboard building, and that is the soldering. I do the corners first, and especially with foam, make sure you're pushing down the foam and the PCB and the plate and that everything is flush. After you're done soldering the switches, it's time to plug the keyboard into the computer and make sure all the switches were soldered on properly with a key tester. The next part is to prep the case. For a gasket mounted build, I like to put the gaskets on the case as it gives flexibility in the future. If you ever want to replace the plate or PCB, you won't have to worry about finding gaskets or making sure that they're still sticky if you're going to harvest them from your old plate. If they're on the case, you can switch freely without having to worry. Once all the gaskets are in place, we just need to put the PCB, the plate and the PCB into the bottom case. And for this, you kind of have to go at an angle because of the USB-C and the gasket there. And once the top housing is placed, flip it around, put the screws back in, and then you're pretty much done. The keycap set he went with is the EPPT Cool Kids, and I think it's a really nice looking set, very unique, and I kind of wish I went in on this set myself. I also made him a coiled cable with no aviator. The paracord is yellow and the text fleck is white. I unfortunately didn't get too many shots of the cable itself, but if you want to see more cable making content, let me know. And here's the sound test.